What does 25 cents back on every purchase mean to you? A free lunch? That gadget you've been eyeing? A night out with the fellas? With your Primis Perks checking account, you get 25 cents back with every purchase using your debit card and zero ATM, overdraft, or annual fees. With this completely free account, you can watch the money roll in with every swipe and find the freedom to go further with your cash. Primis, the bank that gets it right. Primis is a member FDIC. ATM transactions do not count towards debit card rewards.
The Big Bark, listen up dog owners, is for you, all you canine lovers. It's your favorite podcast, The Big Bark, with your host, Darragh and canine co-hosts, Bruno and Milly. The Big Bark.
Welcome to another episode of The Big Bark, the show where we are crazy about your dogs, our dogs, and dogs everywhere. I'm your host, Darragh, and joining me as always are my canine co-host, Bruno Milly, who are too lazy to actually come in front of the computer and in front of the microphone as always. So the last few weeks have been a bit crazy. New episode after new episode, week on week, so it's been kind of tiring as well. But we've had great feedback from our last few episodes. We had Cheryl Matters from Fetch a Date in Indiana and bestseller of Leashes and Lovers on with hers there 2 weeks ago, and we had Annie Grossman from the School of Dogs last week. Now this week we are back on Irish soil again, and we are absolutely thrilled to welcome back. He's been a guest on the show back in Christmas 2020 for All Over for Christmas. He is one of the ambassadors for Madra. You may know him from Ireland AM or the RTE TV show, and it's an absolute honour to have this awesome man here today who does so much for animals across Ireland, Pete Wedderburn. Pete, welcome to The Big Bark.
Thanks very much for having me back, Darragh. Great to be here.
Absolutely, like him. Pete, you have your own podcast that goes as well.
Yeah, we do indeed. We've taken a bit of a summer pause on that. We'll be starting again before too long. Yeah, that's with Petfixclub, which is my website. We launched that last November, and so that's keeping me busy, along with being a vet in practice in Bray. So those are my, I suppose, two main projects that I'm involved with.
So Pete, I know like last December when we had you on, you chatted a bit about Petfixclub, and for anyone who like is not familiar with yourself or Petfixclub, tell us a bit about it.
Okay, well, I suppose what Petfixclub is a natural development of what my life's work has been, which has been essentially spreading information, good quality information about pets through the media. And so, you know, I write regular newspaper columns, regional newspapers in Ireland, the Daily Telegraph in the UK, and more recently, the last 6 months, I've been writing a weekly column in the Examiner every Monday. So I've always been talking about pets in newspapers, and I've done television for over 20 years now, between way back Echo Island on RTE, and then I was the Ireland AM vet for many years, and then more recently I was doing the Today Show on RTE. So I've been doing television, and I've also been doing radio through most recently through News Talk and Pat Kenny Show. So all of those ways of using, if you like, the mass media to spread good quality information about pets. And so really, I guess I realized that just in the same way that all of the other sort of representations of information have changed from traditional models to using the internet, whether it's movies being streamed, or whether it's newspapers going online, or whether it's podcasts like this, everything has gone through the internet. So I decided to set up, if you like, a website that did my job of working as a vet in the media, but through the internet, through a website. And that's really what Petfixclub is. So what happens is people sign up, and they can sign up for free for a month so they can see what it's like. And I'd encourage anybody to do that. There's three, I suppose, pillars of Petfixclub. The first one being an online library of resources. So if you want to know about cruciate disease or lumps and bumps on your dog or diabetes in your cat, whatever, you can find articles that I've written on these topics. And we've done a couple of hundred of really professional videos explaining some of the more complex issues that pets get. So there's a library full of all that stuff. Then as well as that, we have an online shop, basically a pet shop. You can get anything that you want for your pet. And then the third aspect is, I suppose, an element of personalized pet care. And that involves things like a triage tool. So it helps you work out if you need to take your pet to the vet. There's a personalized pet planner, which I love, which is basically the website asks you about 50 questions. You can do them bit by bit or all at once. And at the end of it, it gives you color-coded recommendations as to what you need to do to give your pet their best life. And that would be, green would mean you're doing everything absolutely bang on. So you're walking a dog twice a day, you're brushing its teeth regularly, blah, blah, blah. Amber means there's a few tweaks that you need to do. And red means you really need to take urgent action. So if you haven't wormed your dog for 2 years, you really, really need to do it. So the personalized pet planner helps people work out and what they need to do to give their pet their best life. And the third part then of the pet care section, which has turned out actually to be the most popular part of the website, is an Ask a Vet question. And what that means is people, if they've got a query of any kind about their pet, they type it into the website and they click on send. And usually within an hour, I'll get back to them with a response. As a personal response from me, basically giving them feedback on just in general the best way to approach the problem that they're dealing with. It absolutely doesn't take place of going to the vet. I think you always need to go to the vet for serious problems. There's no doubt about that. What people sometimes wonder about is, do I need to go to the vet with this problem? Or they might go to the vet and they might say, well, the vet said this, what does that mean? Because vets, we're all busy as vets, and sometimes it's difficult to give everybody all the information that they want to know in a 15-minute consultation. Or they may come home from the consultation, they might go, what was that about again? So I basically help people fill in the gaps of knowledge. And sometimes that's just for my own knowledge. Other times I'll refer them to really good websites that I know that give them the information. It's very hard as a pet owner to navigate the internet. I've always found that if I Google a common pet problem, I know that the websites I get taken to aren't the best ones to give the information, because what happens with websites these days is people who run the websites tend to stuff them with search, with keywords and so on. And so the websites that come up to the top tend to be ones that people have invested in making them popular. And often that's because people want to sell something. And so, what I know is I know what's a really helpful information type website. So I would refer people to those really helpful websites rather than what search engines tend to push them towards. So that I suppose is in essence what Petfixclub is. And people can use those facilities and they can send as many Ask a Vet questions as they want. And what we do is we charge, after the first 3 months, we charge them €7 a month. Oh, as well as that, by the way, they get discounted prices in the pet shop. So in my mind, what happens is essentially it pays for itself, because if they buy their food and their other things they need for their pet, then they'll get the money back anyway through the discounts. So that's really how it works.
That's pretty cool. And I know myself, I've used it a couple of times myself, and I definitely need to buy a few things for Bruno Milly off the store as well, because I've looked at the store, there's such a huge array of products on the store.
Yeah.
So, Pete, you've been a vet for years, and I think there's a couple of different topics that we want to talk about today. And one of those is, I suppose, especially amongst maybe older dogs, it's and not even just dogs, it's cats as well. And it's one that we were talking about before you came on air, via email a couple weeks ago, and it's canine and feline cognitive disorder. So for anyone who doesn't actually understand what this is, would you mind explaining exactly what that is?
Well, I suppose the easiest way to describe it is dementia in pets. And just as dementia is incredibly common in humans. Something like 50% of us, once we reach the age of 85, about 50% of us will develop dementia. It's that common. It's astonishingly common. And it also is that common in older dogs and cats. And it's something which is often not recognized as such. People often just think that their older pet is getting old and changing because they're getting old. What we know now from more observation, and also importantly from more dynamic imaging, in other words, doing special types of MRI scans of dogs and cats' brains, we know that they suffer similar types of changes to the brain that humans with dementia do. And if you analyze pets' behavior, they show similar types of behavioral changes. Now, they can't express themselves, they can't talk, obviously, so they can't, it's not maybe as obvious that they can't remember who you are, you know, but once you bear in mind, once you have in your mind, yes, my pet may have dementia, you can then understand why they're behaving differently. And then there are some treatments that can help that a little bit. But I think probably more importantly, pet owners can understand what's happening. And understanding what's happening is the best first stage to actually dealing with it.
And that's very true, because like obviously like you hear of different dogs around the world who like have managed to understand, maybe there's 1 or 2 dogs around the world who understand maybe 2,000 words of the English language. But that's only like a handful of dogs. Most dogs, like if you're speaking English to them, they don't understand, and their like language is like, say, not just barking, it's like calming signals and like other forms of like body language to give off. And as humans, we don't understand that. So it's kind of like how
communication is definitely a big issue between us and our dogs. It really is. We're getting much better at it. There's a really good book I've got here. I don't know if you've come across this one. It's by somebody called Zazie Todd, and it's called WAG: The Science of Making Your Dog Happy. And a lot of this book, it's basically it's like it's all about things like motivation and training and how dogs interact with people, how dogs are social, what you can do to make your dog happier when they go to the vet. And it's all about, I would say a lot of this is about communication, about communicating with dogs effectively, because we're not very good at it. We tend to treat them like little people. So we tend to repeat saying the same phrase to them all the time as if they'll suddenly understand it. But of course they don't, because they're not little people. So we need to learn to understand them and to treat them accordingly.
So Pete, with like cognitive disorder, what are the signs really for an owner to watch out for?
Well, I think the most obvious signs are visible changes in behavior, changes. So you're looking for change. So I suppose you're talking about older pets, and that means dogs and cats over the age of 10, it can start. And certainly over the age of 15, I'd say it's very, very common indeed. And so the sorts of things would be sleeping disorders. So dogs they would start sleeping more. They might wake at the wrong time of day. They lose their usual daily pattern. So they might wake up at 2 a.m. and start barking. And then they might sleep till lunchtime the next day. So that's one part. Generally, random vocalization is a big part of it as well. So just barking a lot generally, just for no particular reason you can work out. Then also losing spatial awareness. So like normally if a dog wants to go out through the door, they will go to the side of the door where they can go through when you open the door for them. But what they will tend to do with cognitive decline is they'll go to the side of the door where the hinges are, where obviously they can't go through when you open the door. So they get confused like that. What they will also do is they will sometimes start to they'll do things like just go and stand in the corner, just looking into the corner of the room for no particular reason. They'll just, behave in an odd way like that. Their behavior changes in that way. They also often have what we know also with humans with dementia. And actually, this is something my own mother died of dementia some years ago. And through her illness, I learned a lot about humans with dementia. And one of the things that I learned that may be obvious to listeners, maybe not, is that what happens in dementia is the brain basically degenerates due to various reasons, whether it's vascular causes or whether it's plaques forming on the brain or whether it's chronic inflammation in the brain, whatever. The brain structure changes. And when the forebrain structure changes, people, lose their reasoning and memory. But also, if structures of the brain that control our movements degenerate, then we have difficulty moving. So a lot of humans with dementia have severe mobility problems, and they end up eventually confined to bed because they can't walk anymore. So the same thing applies in dogs, that they have movement issues as well. They can't move like they used to move around. So they might stumble, they might have difficulty negotiating steps, not because they've got arthritis, which is what people might think, but because they're just not able to move their muscles in the same way. So that's another big part of it. And then another area is eating. Their eating habits change. They might not want to eat, or they might even eat ravenously and hungrily. They might lose the usual control that the brain has on appetite, and so that can change as well. I think the most difficult thing for owners is that I think that dogs do stop remembering who their owners are, just like humans with dementia forget. So do dogs. And so what owners will find is that a dog will just have a sort of distant view in their eye, and they won't respond to their owners in the same way as they used to. And this is very, very upsetting for people, because they, just as with humans with dementia, you lose the person before they die. The same with your pet, that you lose your original pet because the animal doesn't recognize you anymore, and they become a different animal in many ways, and that's a very difficult thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously something it must be so upsetting for so many dog owners. If their own the dog they've had for years doesn't recognize them, that's got to be very upsetting. And you look at, especially last year, I suppose we look at the mental impact that COVID has had on a lot of people, and something like that, obviously that has to have a profound effect on someone's mental health as well. If their own dog who they've had for years doesn't remember them.
Yes, it's difficult. It's not always so obvious because, as I say, they can't talk, so you don't have those conversations. It's more a behavioural change that people will notice. So really, it's very broad, and it this mixed up also with other diseases of old age. So often a dog with cognitive decline will also have arthritis. So they'll be finding it difficult to go up steps for that reason as well. And often there may be other underlying diseases like chronic renal disease or chronic liver disease. So you have these what's called comorbidities, in other words, different diseases happening at the same time, which can make quite a confusing picture. And that's one of the reasons why it's really important. If you think your dog's got dementia, got cognitive decline, you shouldn't just make that diagnosis and presume that's what it is and struggle on. You should go to your vet, because they will help. They'll do a full assessment of your pet, including most likely blood samples and maybe urine samples, and they'll help you work out, is the cognitive decline the only issue, or are there other issues as well that are making it more complex?
Yeah, and you mentioned arthritis there, and I know one of the things that we previously talked about there was you look at the advances in medicine, and you mentioned to me there's a lot of advances in, especially in arthritis treatment.
Oh, listen, that's probably the biggest good news story around at the moment for dogs and for cats. Is for many, many years, the mainstay of treatment for arthritis has been a group of drugs known as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, of which the most simple version would be aspirin, but there would also be a drug called carprofen, which would be well known as Rimadyl or Canadryl. There's lots of different generics of that particular drug. Another well-known one is meloxicam, and again, the well-known brand would be Metacam, but there's lots of other versions of it. So for many, many years, those drugs, they're really, really good at removing pain and inflammation, and they have given many dogs many years of good life. There's a small downside, well, it can be a very big downside, is that they can affect the liver and kidneys. And they don't usually, but there's a risk of that. But nonetheless, they're great drugs. But
if Cabot Exterior Stain was a chair, it'd be upholstered in rich, full-grain leather imported from Italy. Crafted with premium quality for over 140 years, Cabot is made to bring out the true character of wood and help it tell the story it was born to tell. Cabot, trusted by pros for over 140 years. Available at a retailer near you.
What's happened this year is that a brand new way of treating arthritis was launched in the springtime. And the brand name is Librela, and it's an injection that's given once a month. And what it is it's something called a monoclonal antibody. And so what that means is that it's an antibody against a particular chemical in the blood called nerve growth factor. And what nerve growth factor does essentially is carry the pain sensation from the joints to the brain. So if you're giving a dog an antibody against that particular chemical, then the dog may have joints that are producing this nerve growth factor, but the nerve growth factor has been eliminated, and so it doesn't get to the brain, so the dog doesn't feel the pain. And so basically, you give an injection once a month. The monoclonal antibodies in Librela, they mop up all the nerve growth factor, and your arthritic dog doesn't feel pain. Now, as well as that, there is some actual anti-inflammatory effect as well, additionally, because nerve growth factor promotes inflammation. So there's an extra aspect there as well. And I mean, the theory is one thing, but what is really remarkable is the practice. And what I mean by that is dogs that have been struggling around for years, they've been given non-steroidal drugs and they've been helped, but they're still struggling. They're given a couple of injections of this new product, and they're just like new young dogs again. Really, it's rare for us to have a new drug that is like a miracle drug, but this one is like that. And there's a version for cats as well. It's called Silencia. I have a 16-year-old cat who has really bad arthritis, and worse than that, she actually has kidney failure as well. So I can't give her the normal non-steroidal drugs. So I was giving her just glucosamine, chondroitin sulfate, and I was giving her mackerel oil, and that was going to helping her a bit. But she'd stopped going upstairs because she had painful joints, and she was hobbling around the place. And she was obviously in pain, and it was difficult to watch her. So she started on the once monthly injection of Silencia, and again, she's like a different cat. She's able to go upstairs again for the first time in years, and she doesn't hobble anymore. She walks around normally. So these are prescription only drugs, and they that means that you have to go to your vet. You have to confirm that your pet has the type of arthritis that this will work well with. But if they do have it, then it's fabulous. It's expensive. Let's say if you have a Labrador with arthritis, it might cost you 15 or 20 euros to treat them with non-steroidal drugs every month, 15 or 20 euros a month. Whereas with the monoclonal antibodies, you're more likely to be, 80, 90 or 100 euros a month, something like that. So it's much more expensive, but it is dramatically better for a lot of dogs, and the side effects seem to be almost non-existent, So anyway, that's just an example, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's very new and it's very important for people to know about this, to talk to their vet about it if they think their pet may benefit from it.
That's incredible, Pete. And I just think in general the advances are there in medicine, not just for humans but for dogs. I've recently been reading about Gregory Burns over in Emory University in the US, who's doing so much experiments over the last number of years, putting dogs while they're away through MRI scans and just measuring the amount of activity that's going on in their brains. You go back 20, 30 years, you wouldn't have thought that any of this, I suppose, medical advance would have been there for pets.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt that we can do so much more for pets now. I mean, the downside of it is that it makes going to the vet much more expensive, because like 30 years ago, with some problems, you go to the vet and they would kind of say, well, I'm afraid there's not much we can do here. Your pet's life is limited. Whereas now they'll say to you, well, we can do MRI scan, we can do complex spinal type surgery. We may be able to fix this problem, but you're going to spend 5, 6, 7, 8,000 euros on doing that. And so this is the challenge to the science, is that it means that then people have a choice, but the choice often involves a lot of money, and that's can be difficult to write.
Absolutely, but even at that, like when you look at the amount of different pet insurance policies out there nowadays, like I spoke with John from Tree Vets here in Limerick a number of weeks ago about different pet insurance policies, and like I myself, I have the pet insurance for Bruno because like he was young enough when I got it. Millie, unfortunately, when she came to us, she was too old to actually be taken on as a first time patient.
7 years is usually the cut-off time.
Yeah, she was about 8 at that stage when she came to us, and but it's such a huge benefit to have
really
pet
is.
insurance for your own peace of mind.
Yeah, basically, people tend to take out pet insurance in the hope that it's going to save them money. I don't know if it does say, on average, it doesn't save people money. It doesn't save money. It's kind of bizarre in that if you're unlucky, your dog gets some awful problem, then you will save a lot of money, because if your dog breaks a leg and it's you wouldn't wish that in any dog, but if they do, you can afford the very best treatment because the insurance company is going to pay for it. But if your dog doesn't doesn't break its leg, then it's going to cost you every month and you might never need it. But what it does buy you is peace of mind, and that's the key thing. People sometimes say to me, well, why don't I just put the same amount as the insurance premium in the bank every month and save it, and then I got a war chest so I can pay for my pet's treatment when they need it. And yes, it is possible to do that, but the downside of that is that it'll only work if your pet has many years of good health and then they get sick or have an accident. But if you start to save up money and your dog breaks a leg when they're a year and a half old, it's not going to work. So I think pet insurance it's not a high margin business to be in. And what I mean by that is that I think that it's a fairly honest type business. In other words, they take everybody's money's in. They take a markup. I don't know what it is, whether it's 5% or 10%. They take some of that money, but most of the money goes back towards helping animals who need help. So let's say, you might pay 20 euros a month for your pet insurance. And you have to remember that that's not money which the company is just taking and having as profit. They're probably taking 2 euros a month or something and having it as profit. But 18 euros is genuinely being redistributed to other pets that actually need it. So, I think it's a great concept, and yes, it can be expensive, but the point is that really good quality veterinary care is very expensive. There aren't cheap ways of doing the exciting latest medical investigations and treatments. You just can't do it cheaply any more than you can in humans.
Yeah, definitely agree. Now, Pete, I suppose the last thing I want to talk to you about today is it's something that I've seen myself in dogs over the last, with the rapid increase in climate change. Like, dogs have become more prone to skin issues, and I suppose particularly even in the last few years, dogs are become more prone to skin disease.
Maybe. I'm not sure if it's becoming more common than it used to be. It's always been a big issue. Skin disease has always been problematic.
So what's say you have a dog with skin infections or with skin disease, what's the best way for an owner to deal with it?
Well, what I'd say to people is that the best answer is to go to Petfixclub and look up skin disease, and you'll discover really detailed explanations of all this stuff, because it is quite complex. But then again, it's also very logical and straightforward. So you've got a dog that's got itchy skin. You go to your vet. Now, often what the vet may do is simply say, well, we're going to give your pet some medication to stop the skin being itchy. Because often if a dog gets itchy skin, they start to scratch themselves. By scratching themselves, they actually make it worse. They damage the skin with their claws and by nibbling it. So if the vet gives medication to take away the itchiness, then your pet will stop itching in many cases. And if they stop itching, then the skin will get better. And then that's the job done. Then, so often vets may do that as a first approach. But if the skin comes back again, being itchy a second time, then that's when you really need to investigate things. So how do you investigate skin disease? Well, the first thing vets would do is they would rule out parasites. Fleas are incredibly common. Even if you don't see fleas, fleas can cause itchiness under the surface, just in a hidden way. So ruling out parasites, not just fleas, but also mites. And these days it's done very easily by oral medication. We can give a dog a tablet, and we know that it's going to eliminate fleas, it's going to eliminate the different types of mites that dogs can get. So it's quite straightforward to rule out parasites. So that's the first thing we would do. We would often also want to rule out food allergy. Food allergy probably causes something like 20% of itchy dogs, 20%. And there's no test for that. There's no effective blood test for food allergy in dogs. The only way you can diagnose it is by putting them on a trial diet. And that means giving them, allergies are to proteins. And so what you have to do is you have to give a dog a diet with very restricted proteins for a period of about 6 weeks. And you can do that by using, if you like, a home cooked type approach. You might use proteins the dog's never had before, such as mutton and potato, something like that. Or you can use commercial, so-called hydrolyzed diets. These are diets that have been pre-digested, so they don't contain any protein chains that can cause an allergy. Whichever way you decide to do it, you put them on a food trial for about 6 weeks, and they must have nothing but the special diet. If it's food allergy, they'll stop itching completely. And you can then try them with different diets to see what they can tolerate. So ruling out parasites and doing a food trial, that will often be the first thing that a vet will do. And what they will then do after that, it gets more complicated. They may take skin scrapes, they may take a skin biopsy to have it analyzed in the laboratory to actually see under the microscope, what sort of changes are happening at a microscopic level in the skin. Or they might give trial therapies. They might, there's a very, very common problem called atopy, which is essentially allergies to dusts and pollens. And that's very common. And one of the ways it's diagnosed is simply by giving, there's like a number of criteria. And one of them is response to anti-inflammatory medication. In other words, you give them medication and they get better, and then stop the medication and they get worse again. Then that's one of the keys to making the diagnosis. And if they have atopy, then that's an allergy to dust and pollens. You can't remove dust and pollens from around the dog. You can't do that. So you have to give them. There's two approaches to treatment. One of them is long-term anti-inflammatory medication, and people will be familiar with that. That's like your dog basically having a tablet every day or every second day forever, or possibly an injection once a month forever. But the other way of doing it is what's called hyposensitization or immunotherapy, where you actually do another type of test to find out which pollens exactly, which dusts exactly are causing the allergy, and then you give a very diluted version of that to your dog regularly once a month forever, and that desensitizes them. And the problem with that is it only works well in around 50 to 70% of dogs, and it's quite expensive. So vets don't tend to rush to do that because it's, because if it was 99% successful, we do it all the time. But because of the relatively low efficacy, we don't tend to use it as much as people might think we would. So there you go in a nutshell. But skin disease is huge. It's a massive problem. And that's why I've written about it and done videos about it so much on Petfixclub, because, understanding it is the key, understanding why your pet's itching in the first place.
And yeah, I know myself, like even from during the summer there, both Millie and Bruno, like they both had to go on anti-inflammatory tablets because they
Yeah,
both got, I believe what the vet said at the time, like it was an allergic reaction to whatever pollen or whatever was in the air,
yeah,
and like the tablets cleared it up, but
yes.
like that's not always going to be the case either.
Yeah, it's often it's a seasonal problem. So there'd be some dogs that would need these tablets maybe for May, June, July, August, September, and then they're fine in the winter. So, it depends.
So Pete, like, what's the plan now going forward for Petfixclub?
Well, basically, we launched last November, and it's been a very interesting sort of process. Um, it's like any other startup in a sense that what you do is you have an idea for something that you hope is going to bring value to people, and you put it out on the market and you see how people react to it, and that's known as your first iteration. In other words, it's your idea put out to the world, but then what happens is the world responds to that, and so you discover very quickly what people like and what they don't like so much. And so then what you do is you focus on developing the things that they like, and you don't worry so much about the things that didn't really work. So that's the stage that we're at. And over the next 4 to 8 weeks, we're relaunching with a slightly different approach, with different emphasis, and the website will be different as well. And that's going to reflect what people have really enjoyed. And so when people go to it, they'll go, oh, right, there's more of that. And, oh, yeah, I can see that now. And so that's the idea. And probably there'll be many iterations over the years as well, as we gradually discover what really works. And I would also say that very much for us, Ireland is the pilot market. In other words, we're finding out what pet owners generally like and what they want by working with people in Ireland. But once we've done that, once we've evolved it to a stage that we're really, really happy that we're ticking everybody's boxes, then we'll be looking further afield. And in fact, in December, one of the exciting things that I'm doing is I'm going to speak at a conference on innovative pet care in Boston in the US, where I'll be talking about our experiences with Petfix and comparing and contrasting with other similar types of services that are available in the US and indeed in other countries. Because one of the really exciting things about the internet is that it's global. So that, if I've put a website up, people in Ireland can go to it, but so can people anywhere in the world at any time at all. And, the mission for Petfix is to provide high quality veterinary information to everywhere, to everyone, everywhere, all the time, at a good price. And that's what we'll try. That's our aim is to do. And everywhere means everywhere, literally. And I have to say, for me, one of the really exciting aspects of it is when I help somebody who's living in the Philippines and their cat's seriously unwell and they can't even find a vet. That to me is, to be able to help them makes a huge difference to me. And I really value that. And, there was a horse, of all things, on a remote island in Fiji that had a really big problem. Now, horses aren't my main thing at all, but nonetheless, when somebody's in trouble with an animal and they can't get to a vet at all, then you certainly can help them.
That's fantastic. And I'd say going to Boston, getting back to face to face sessions, conferences. I know we were meant to originally be doing this face to face ourselves today. I was meant to be going to Dublin, but unfortunately the thing I was going to was cancelled. But it must be a great sense in one way of returning to somewhat normality.
Yes, I mean, we're coming out of COVID, and it's great to be able to. We're having people back in the concert rooms now in the clinic. I mean, we've managed to work very well with the systems that we developed. But still, it's not the same. And the best thing is to be in a room with an owner, examining the animal with them, talking to them at the time. It works the best. And we're all happy that that's coming back on stream.
All right, Pete. So if people want to find Petfixclub, what's the URL for them to go to?
It's petfixclub.com, or you can just go to petfix.com either.
Brilliant. And you're on Instagram and Facebook as well?
I am indeed. Well, we are indeed. Yes.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Listen, Pete Wedderburn, aka Pete the Vet, thank you ever so much once again for joining me on the Big Back. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Darragh. Been fun.
The Big Bark, listen up dog owners, is for you, all you canine lovers. It's your favorite podcast, The Big Bark, with your host Darragh Burke and canine co-hosts Bruno and Milly. The Big Bark.
With bills to pay and debt piling up, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Personal loans through NetCredit can provide funding up to $10,000 to help you get back on track financially if eligible. Our secure application process allows you to customize the terms that work for you and your budget. So check your eligibility today without affecting your credit score and help get your finances back on track. NetCredit, a more personal loan. All NetCredit loans and lines of credit are offered by a member of the NetCredit family of companies or one of our lending partners. Visit netcredit.com/partners for more information.